As we seek to understand the concept of wildlife conservation and management, there's a dire need to understand the laws that govern this noble adventure in Kenya and the agencies that have been put in place to help boost conservation. In Kenya, wildlife is managed by the government on behalf of the people for the people. Public participation is encouraged on environmental issues by the Constitution. The country is famed for its wildebeest migration and the Big Five, which are the elephants, rhinos, lions, buffaloes, and the leopards. Wildlife is a major source of foreign exchange for Kenya through tourism, and there are numerous threats facing this wildlife, which include poaching, human-wildlife conflict, habitat fragmentation, habitat degradation, bushfires, illegal logging, and illegal trade in wild flora and fauna, pollution, and climate change. Therefore, there's an urgent need to understand these laws as much as we understand the concept of conservation. The agency that has been tasked with this role in Kenya is the Kenya Wildlife Services, the KWS. KWS was established in 1990 and operates under the premise that if people benefit from wildlife and other natural resources, then they will take care of these resources because they understand their value and appreciate their importance. Wildlife Conservation and Management Act of 2013 clearly outlines the roles of Kenya Wildlife Services, which include but not limited to 1. Conserving and managing national parks and wildlife conservation areas, providing security for wildlife and visitors in the conservation areas, collecting revenue due to the government from wildlife, developing benefit sharing mechanisms to the communities living around the conservation areas, conducting and coordinating all research and education activities in the field of wildlife conservation, establishing forensic laboratories. At the county level, this act provides for the establishment of the County Wildlife Management Committee that is composed of the chairman appointed by the cabinet secretary, the county government representative, the county agricultural officer, the county land use and planning officer, the county livestock officer, the county service officer, who is the secretary in this team, the county medical officer, the county police officer, the county environmental officer, and 4 elected persons who are not public officers. These people play a major role in this composition because in cases of human-wildlife conflict, the cases have to be assessed by the officers in charge of medical services. The police officers have to be there. In cases of livestock being killed and the crops destroyed, we have to have the agricultural and livestock officers to assess the level of the damage. The Wildlife Conservation and Management Act of 2013 also provides for the roles of County Wildlife Conservation and Compensation Committee. These roles include and are not limited to 1. Preventing human-wildlife conflict, raising public awareness, performing extension services, and educating the public on the values and the importance of this wildlife. They ensure stakeholders participate in the planning and implementation of conservation efforts in the county. They participate in county land use planning in collaboration with the stakeholders. So that brings the importance of the county land use and planning officer in this group. In Narok, the primary form of land use is the communal system. So anyone purchasing a piece of land in Masai land, it is illegal or it will be illegal to start subdividing the piece of land for private use. So this committee seeks to harmonize all these arguments to bring a common understanding. They take part in the development and monitoring of national parks, conservancies, and ecosystem management plans. The Wildlife and Conservation Management Act of 2013 also provides for the compensation of any losses and damages caused by wildlife. So in the event of loss of life, injury or damage to property caused by wildlife, one is required to make a report to the nearest KWS office within 48 hours. From there, the KWS officers will submit the claim to the County Conservation and Compensation Committee, which shall review and compensate accordingly as per the regulations. Important to note is, no compensation will be paid for losses or damages caused by the primates like the baboons and the vervet monkeys. Now that we understand that this act provides for the compensation or loss and damages caused by wildlife, not all damages will be compensated. Reason being, there are a list of animals that are compensated. So in case of death and injuries arising from either of these animals, then one is eligible for compensation. These animals include elephants, lions, leopards, the rhinos, the hyena, the crocodile, cheetah, buffalo, venomous snakes, hippos, the shark, stonefish, whales, stingray, wild dog, and wild pigs. So those are the only animals compensated for in case of death and injury. So in the event of crops and livestock and property being damaged, the specific animals that when they cause such damages, then one is eligible for compensation. These include the elephants, the lions, leopards, rhinos, hyena, crocodile, cheetah, buffalo, hippos, the zebras, eland, wildebeest, wild dog, and the snakes. Under this act, there are clear guidelines and values attached to each incident. In case of death, one can be compensated up to 5 million Kenyan shillings. In case of injuries resulting to permanent disability, one can be compensated up to 3 million Kenyan shillings. Other injuries attract a compensation of up to 2 million Kenyan shillings. With privileges also come limits which, when trespassed, attract hefty penalties. So under this act, there are specific offences which, when committed, will attract specific penalties. One being hunting, engaging in sports hunting in Kenya for black rhino, white rhino, and the elephant will attract a penalty of 20 million Kenya shillings fine on the minimum or a life imprisonment. Practicing sport hunting for other endangered species will attract a fine of 5 million Kenya shillings or 5 years imprisonment. For all other animals, this offense will attract a 1 million Kenya shillings fine or 2 years imprisonment. Hunting for meat, that is subsistence hunting, attracts a fine of 30,000 Kenya shillings or at least 6 months imprisonment. Hunting for bushmeat trade or dealing in meat of any wild animal will attract a fine of 200,000 Kenya shillings or an imprisonment term of 1 year or both. The other offense is posing threats to endangered species. The elephants, white rhinos, the black rhinos, the cheetah, lions, leopards, and the wild dogs attract a minimum fine of 20 million Kenya shillings or life imprisonment or both. Engaging in habitat and ecosystem pollution attracts a fine of not less than 2 million or imprisonment of not less than 5 years or both. The court may also decide that the offender pays for the full cost of the habitat and ecosystem cleaning. Also, the court may decide that he or she be punished by cleaning the habitat and ecosystem to the satisfaction of the service. Possession of wildlife trophies. Anyone caught in possession of any wildlife trophy or wildlife product or anyone dealing in any wildlife product commits a crime. This is where most of the ladies have found themselves on the wrong side of the law unknowingly, being that most of their handbags, their cloth prints are made from the products of this wildlife. They love collecting corals from the oceans. Even a few guys have been caught at the airport in possession of elephant tusks without the permission or the permits from the KWS. This crime attracts a fine of 1 million Kenyan shillings on the minimum, or a 5 years imprisonment on the minimum, or both. Management plan. Anyone that tries to alter the management plan commits a crime. If this is done or relates to the plan of national reserves and parks, this crime attracts a fine of 500,000 Kenyan shillings on the minimum, or 2 years imprisonment. In other cases, the fine is at least 100,000 Kenyan shillings. Anyone who intentionally introduces invasive species in the wildlife conservation areas commits a crime. These invasive species include the water hyacinth, the endangered trees, mentioned by a few. This crime attracts a fine of 30,000 Kenyan shillings on the minimum, or imprisonment of 1 year at least, or both. Compensation offenses. When you make a false compensation, it's a great crime. It attracts a fine of 100,000 Kenyan shillings on the minimum, or a prison term of 6 months on the minimum, or both. It is illegal to graze inside the national parks. Therefore, no one should enter the national park with their livestock. The cabinet secretary usually makes the guidelines regarding the access to national parks for grazing and watering during the times of drought. So doing this in your own wisdom is a great crime, and it attracts a fine of 100,000 Kenyan shillings on the minimum, or a prison term of 6 months. Anyone that who tries to obtain a license or permit and makes a false statement during the conservation order and easement commits a crime. And this attracts a minimum fine of 20,000 Kenyan shillings, or a prison term of 1 year on the minimum, or both. Anyone that engages in the importation and exportation of wildlife without the permission from KWS commits a crime. If this involves critically endangered animals, this attracts a fine of 5 million Kenyan shillings, or a prison term of 5 years on the minimum. But for other wildlife, this crime attracts a fine of 1 million Kenyan shillings, or a prison term of 2 years. Anyone caught engaging in either of the following activities within the protected areas commits a crime. 1. Anyone who enters a national park or national reserve without a license or permit, or not in the course of duty. Number 2. Anyone who sets fire to any vegetation in any wildlife protected area, or allows fire to lit or to be lit by an associate to spread into a wildlife protected area. 3. Anyone who carries out logging in a national park or reserve. 4. Anyone who clears or cultivates land in a national park or reserve. anyone that damages or attempts to remove any geological or historic object in a wildlife protected area, anyone that takes a firearm, ammunition, arrow, spear, snare, poison, or banned agrochemical substances in a protected area with an intention to kill wildlife, or anyone who carries out extractive or damaging activity in a marine protected area, like the extraction of the corals, commits a great deal of crime. These attracts a fine of 200,000 Kenya shillings or a prison term of 2 years or both. The last but not the least thing I want us to understand from the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act of 2013 is that it also provides for the guidelines on wildlife utilization. And it specifically categorizes this into two: the non-consumptive and the consumptive. The non-consumptive form of wildlife utilization, there is wildlife tourism, commercial photography or filming, education, research, cultural, and religious purposes. So under consumptive wildlife utilization, the Act provides for game farming, that is rearing of wildlife in an enclosed or controlled environment, game ranching, live capture, that is taking animals from the wild while alive, research involving offtake, cropping, that is harvesting wildlife for a range of products, and culling, that is selective removal of wildlife based on scientific reasoning. Wildlife conservation and management adventure is very important, but it is not right to do this blindly. We need to understand the laws of the land that governs us in this activity. So equipping ourselves with the knowledge of conservation and also understanding the laws is very critical towards effective management and conservation of wildlife. So thank you once again for listening to my presentation. Please, if you like this, remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button so that in future you may also enjoy other slides that will be coming forth. Thank you.